How do you evaluate a company's competitive advantage, or more commonly known as a moat? That's what I'm going to cover in this video, which is effectively our Q&A series. And so as you guys smash that like button, let me run that intro. What's up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now, I got a very interesting question for this version of the Q&A series. The question is, how do you evaluate a company's competitive advantage, or more commonly known as its moat? Well, what I've done is I've given you guys a perfect free tool to help you along with this. In the description of this video, there is a free tools section. In that free tools section, there's a link that says Super Stock Analyzer Tool, and let's dive right into that. So in the super sophisticated, which I put in quotes because there's no such thing as a stock analyzer tool, and if anybody tries to sell you a stock analyzer tool, do not buy it. They do a lot of that on YouTube, guys, so just be careful. But I would say that in this super sophisticated stock analyzer tool, the first two questions help us identify the competitive advantage that the company holds and how sustainable it is. And so question number one really revolves around our understanding of the company and its operations and what it means to the overall economy, etc. And so the first question, and these are just Warren Buffett's 4 questions that he asks before he buys a company, but the first question is this a company that I understand? And part of that analysis is you should be able to do a SWOT analysis. This is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. And when you go through the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, you really get a better understanding of the company overall. And so, this is why I don't really call myself a value investor. I call myself an investor, a business owner. And so when it comes to owning businesses, in order to purchase a business, I have to do at least this level of analysis over every single company. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to start adding this to the tracker for every company, just a point or two for every single one, because it'll force me to make sure that I articulate that to everyone who has access to the tracker as well. And so, another area that you should be looking at is the financial statements, just to understand exactly how the company makes its money. Now, the other thing is, I don't necessarily agree that unprofitable companies are not good investments, but what I would say is that there's a lot of hype behind unprofitable companies. And so when you are looking at a company that's not making profits, tread carefully. There is a lot of risk there, but there could be some opportunities there as well. But once again, in order to understand if an unprofitable company is warranted an investment, you really have to go through that SWOT. Now, I'm going to give you 3 questions for each strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats in this video that you can screenshot and use for yourself. The second question is, does the company have a favorable long-term economics? Now, once you complete the strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, threats up here, this is really the moat. This is really asking whether or not they have a competitive advantage. And, answering the question, will the company be competitive over the very long term? Well, when you answer the opportunities and threats, or when you look at these 2 questions and you look at them in conjunction with what the strengths and the weaknesses are of the company, you can pretty much answer this question. And once you answer that question, you have your answer as to what exactly their moat is. Now, not every company has a perfect moat. Some companies have multiple moats. Some moats are stronger than others. And your opinion of what their moat might be different than what someone else's opinion of what their moat might be. And so just note that this is all subjective, and that's okay. That's what capital allocation and investments is. And so with that second question, let's dive into a little bit more detail. So, the question really is, does a company have favorable long-term economics, i.e., what is its competitive advantage? What is its moat that will help maintain its competitiveness over the long term? And so the first area is, once again, what I mentioned, here's where the SWOT analysis comes in very handy, especially the opportunities and threats section. Now, the second question you should be looking at, or the second concept you should be looking at is, what industry does it compete in? And is it an industry that's constantly changing? And so the question I would ask, and this is the high level question, is why are you convinced that this industry will not undergo any change over the next 100 years? Well, in order to think about this, you sort of have to break it up in pieces. So what you would almost ask yourself, like, what should this industry or what will this industry look like in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years, and then 75 years and 100 years? And so just sort of like think about it from that perspective, because that will ultimately impact your valuation. An industry like Coca-Cola or like soft drinks, I could see Coca-Cola still selling globally over the next 50 to 100 years. However, I can also see from a threats perspective that consumer tastes could move away from sugary drinks. And so how does Coca-Cola address that? And they are addressing that by creating a whole ecosystem of drinks. So if people move away from sugar, well, they have their diet versions. Well, if people want to move away from the diets, well, they have other soft drinks as well. They purchase up a lot of competitors as well. And so that's how they're addressing the next 100 years. And so the stock Coca-Cola will probably be okay. Another industry that will probably be around over the next 100 years is flying. But, just because, airlines will probably exist over the next 100 years, at least I think that they will, I could be wrong, doesn't necessarily mean that any particular airline will be in business over the next 100 years. And so, that's just the way that you should be thinking about this. And, I want you guys to take a second and comment below on, how you think about the industry and how it's going to grow or not grow over the next, time period. Essentially, how do you determine if the industry is stable enough for you to predict the results of this company in a reliable manner? Now, if you can't determine if the industry or products are sustainable over the long term, you cannot value the company. So this is why the industry matters so much. And it's because equity valuations rely on a perpetuity multiple. And it's really what it's saying is that you're essentially forecasting out the company's results into forever. Now, you don't necessarily have to forecast a company's results into forever, but what you really are saying if you are not forecasting the company's results into forever is that the company will eventually die. And so then you have to ask yourself the question, when will they die, and why is it still worth capital allocation in that perspective? Now, you can model it out the same way. It's not what I'm going to be doing in this video, but you can model it out the same way. But eventually, you're going to have to if you're going to grow revenues, you have to grow, but eventually you have to bring it back down and of course discount all of that anyways. And so you can do that, but I generally do not like to invest in companies where I see the industry changing or their competitiveness changing in a manner that renders them to inevitably a bankrupt company. So that's just generally not how I like to invest. And so here are the questions that you can screenshot. And you should ask for every opportunity. And, before I dive into this a little bit more, I just want to point out that I do have like these yellow papers. And what I do with them is I'll write like, SWOT. And then as I'm reviewing the company, I'll just, write a couple of notes under the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so I encourage you guys just to get one of these. And, as you're sort of like looking at a company, you should be filling out each of those sections. And, the point that I would make is that if you don't have anything filled out in any one of those boxes, you should probably reconsider your analysis and find a way to fill out that box, because you're probably missing something. Every company has strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so when it comes to the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, the first thing I would say is, with strengths, what is the competitive analysis of the company? What resources do they have access to them? This could be a competitive analysis in themselves, that they have access to a pretty unique or non-duplicable resource. What products are doing well? And then this goes into the weakness side. Where can they improve? What products are underperforming? And, where are they lacking resources? And then these weaknesses lead into sort of what opportunities come out of these weaknesses. In other words, what new technology can they use to improve some of their weaknesses, or what new technology can they move into anyways? Can they expand their operations? What new segments can they test out? These are very interesting questions that, lead to optimism. I find that too many people just focus on this. They don't necessarily focus on this. And then of course, threats is something that people don't focus on as well. But, what regulations are changing? What are competitors doing? How are consumer trends changing? And the only tip that I would provide here is that in many of Peter Lynch's books, there might have just been one book, I can't remember, but what he would do is anytime he wanted to invest in a company, he would also look at the competitors. And in fact, he would be talking to the companies and he'd ask, which one of your competitors do you respect the most? And what he ended up doing is that he would end up in many situations purchasing the stock of the competitor, not the company that he's looking at, because he found something more interesting about the competitor. But he only did this once he understood the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the companies in that industry. So that's something to pay attention to, and I think that'll really help you when it comes to your investment. So that is a good start to determine the company's competitive position and its moat. And so I really hope that helps. And so I'm going to be continuing with this Q&A series. However, if you've missed any of the Q&A videos thus far, you can actually get access to the whole series right here.